Hello and welcome to the breakdown you can see on the screen right now. I did this effect 2.5 years ago and now I just redone this effect to record for you a tutorial and a complete breakdown and just guide you how I made this special effect which I called Infinite Fight. At the very beginning, I had to create my guide for the animation frame by frame of those two balls that was colliding, generating this impact at the very beginning. Just a simply frame by frame animation, kind of doing that half turn and then turning into the very center of my guide to actually collide. And from the collision it actually generates the same motion, so as you can see motion looks pretty much like this. Once I did this one path, I just simply duplicated this layer as you can see, and with two of them I was ready to start drawing everything. I just need couple simple fixes to collide those two balls right in the very center. Once I was happy with the result, I wanted to have two collisions, so I copied and pasted everything and I simply flipped them horizontally and vertically to give this animation a little more variety. With that being said and with that being done, I was able to start making the proper animation of the balls with a way bigger brush size to give this effect of the perspective when something is closer to the screen and further away from the screen. As you can see, I'm simply using one brush size and I'm just using the sensitivity of my Wacom pen. I'm just pressing it a little more and less to create bigger and smaller frame by frame animation. Okay, so now I was ready to just simply copy and paste everything, start drawing a little more, and at some point here I knew that when I will copy and paste entire animation, I will have to switch the first frame and the second. So you can see what I've done here. I just copied and pasted everything and I cut from the first two layers just those two first parts, and from the second two layers I cut the other part. Now I just recolored everything to the second color, and with that I was able to just merge those two layers into one layer and just simply copy and paste the layers to have one color on one layer. I was happy with the result. Maybe just a little more play around was required, just flip something a little more. As you can see now, it's like colliding the other way, and well, this is pretty much what I like. It have the idea of this collision and entirely switching the direction. Once I was happy with the result, I just copied and pasted frame, clicking this a little icon to always create new drawings, and I was able to have just two layers with my animation. Then I played around with the colors and I started creating this one white frame which defines the impact. I just wanted to check how it will look like. Now is the second part, which you know pretty well, I guess, if you are following my tutorials. That ball that is growing, and this is what is creating the impact. At this point I knew I wanted to create two of them, but I wanted to have one more element with the spikes, as you can see here. So what I did one template animated frame by frame with spikes, which was growing along with the ball, and then I just leave the empty space inside of the ball, so I was able to animate it to copy the animation of the balls. As you can see, I'm using exactly the same technique as always, drawing just negative spaces, and with those negative spaces that are growing with the spikes, I simply try to vanish entire spikes all around. Let's speed up a little this process, and with those 3 spikes disappearing completely, I was able to copy and paste this entire area and simply start to draw 2 different impacts. So the animation had more variety, but what's more important, I was able to create front and back side of this ball having 2 different animation, which was pretty awesome. As you can see, I just simply copied and pasted. I played around with the position and rotation of those 2 things to not be very similar, and then I was able to start drawing the inside of the growing balls. The same technique as always, just negative space is growing until it is reaching the border, and once it is reaching the border, I just simply draw just small things which we will see in a second. But to not have those negative spaces, which I don't like, I like to draw those small vanishing balls inside, just to have something inside, to not just vanish everything without anything around this negative space. So yeah, those little particles inside gave everything more life. As you can see, I'm just trying to reach the border. When I reach the border, I simply cutting the outline that's surrounding, that's not in the place where it should be, and in a second we will go to the part when which I talked about a second ago. When it's disappearing, the outline, I simply draw 3 or 4 frames. Let me slow down a little so you can see what's happening. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames, sometimes to give this a little more like slower disappearing, to give this effect a little more thing. Let's speed up. One thing that I want to talk about here more is it will be barely visible because I will use tons of refract and blurs, but I like to have precise things that I can reuse later. So if I will pay a little more attention here, then I will have less work later, because I will be able to actually reuse this entire growing ball, and having a library of that type of things can speed up your workflow like a ton. So now I'm just simply redrawing those second ball, which is just a second version, which I will reuse for the first part to simply have the back side of the ball and give this animation a way more perspective and depth, so everything will just looks a way better. Now just turn back the transparency of the effects, and I was able to create the last tiny detail here, which was move everything in Z depth. So once after the impact, the particle on the front should be actually on the front of the effect. As you can see here, this one should be on the back because it's smaller. So with holding Alt and dragging and drop with left mouse click, I was able to simply move everything in Z depth. So once the ball should be on the front, it was on the front, and once it should be on the back, it was on the back, as you can see here. It's a tiny detail that's barely visible, but all the details matters, so if you can keep up with them, then your effect will look way better. With that being said, I can move to the part where I'm taking this impact and adding tons of effects to it. I added quake and peg peg wasn't actually necessary here, but quake and camera wheel, which allows me later to create simply quake effect when the impact is happening. As you can see, I'm adding the refract and the mask for the refract, which looks like this. And it's literally what I drew here to create the effect that I wanted. Now, I just wanted to create just a little animation and create additional eases for them, so it will be nice and smooth, and you can see how it looks like. It looks weird, okay? It's nothing super special, but when you will connect it with some blurs to refract node and use it as a mask for our impact, with just a slight adjustments, you will see what will happen with this effect. As you can see, weird things started to happen just by having this refract node here, and it stopped looking like a just a generic frame by frame thing, but it added to everything this nice and smooth, organic looking. Sometimes it's necessary, it depends on the client and what style of the effect you want to achieve, but I wanted here to play around, and I recommend you, even if you need to have for a client just a simple effect without all those things, use the layers that you did and play around for like 10-5 minutes, adding some notes, just do whatever you want creatively and just make your knowledge a little more flexible. So just a couple things here that was missing in those negative spaces in my second growing ball, so I decided to add them, as you can see, simply frame by frame. Once I was happy with the result, I was able to start creating more things. So I added glows to glow this effect. And the first one is smaller and more brighter, the second one is bigger and darker. This always gives me a nice, natural and smooth effect, and with this tiny rotation and refraction mask, this effect was started looking in the way that I wanted. Then I just simply copied and pasted my ball, and I knew at this point what I wanted to do. I just wanted to switch the animation that I did frame by frame and also switch the keyframes. So I simply firstly just switched everything, then I had to switch just the keyframes, so everything was at the positions while the exposures was matching. Okay. Then I reused everything, and at the very end I just needed to have one more transparency node to have this backside more transparent than the other part. As you can see here, I'm not switching anything here, it's just 50% on the transparency, and this gave this effect like a pretty cool thing. With all the nodes on, it looks like this, and I love this effect so much. I'm gonna reuse this this thing over and over. For the balls that are colliding, I wanted to use refract as well and create a little glitchiness effect on the tails of the balls. So what I did, I simply drew a couple lines to refract the backside of the balls that are colliding, and with the blur box I just played around trying to find something that I like, and once I had the pattern with just 4 lines or something like that, I just simply draw this frame by frame. It's fairly quick, super fun thing to do. Just a couple frames, frame by frame. Let's speed up a little. frame by frame all along those like 54 frames animation. It took less than 5 minutes, I believe, maybe 7 in total for both things. I could afford it to create it entirely frame by frame to make this glitchiness very glitchy. Then I wanted to play around and I wanted to separate this glitchiness to not look like a part of it, but just like a glitchiness outside. And I wanted to use that radial blur zoom that will be facing this peg that is connected to this blur radial zoom to have this tail really facing towards this point. It started looking in the way that I wanted at some point, and I just wanted to play around with the refract node a little more, and then I achieved the effect that I wanted with the glitch that was looking like this. Okay. Now what I wanted to do, what I needed to do is I had to move this peg along with the animation frame by frame to always have this peg at the backside of the tail. Here I'm just playing around with colors a little. As you can see, when it's facing the peg, it's always facing the peg, so I had to move it frame by frame. So now it's leaning towards, and I'm using here a smart technique. As you can see, nothing appears on my timeline because I'm holding this peg over and over, and I'm pressing period and comma to switch between frames and just drag everything frame by frame. Once I will release this peg, everything will appear, and all the frame by frame work by dragging this peg around the animation is done, as you can see. So effortlessly I created 54 unique positions for this peg, and that was pretty cool. From what I saw here, this peg should be not so close to the object that I wanted to blur, so I needed to make a little more adjustments. I could redone it entirely because it was super quick. I'm happy with this glitchiness effect. You could use something different. I decided to draw a line inside to have a little more glitchy inside. You can do it without it, you can play around. I just wanted to test something that I haven't done yet, and this was pretty much the effect that I wanted to achieve that was in my head. Right now I just had to simply copy and paste everything entirely, just switch those glitchiness lines to the other side, tweak it a little, make more animation frame by frame using my smart technique, play around with the colors a little more, and I was pretty much ready for the entire animation. The last part was the quake. The quake node have something that's called amplitude, and the amplitude is always at 1, so it's quaking everything over and over. But this property is actually animatable, so I can make animation from 1 to 0 when at 0 is not happening at all. I moved it in the way that I wanted, and I just simply copied and pasted everything, so the effect that I had this quake effect on it. Color card, and I was ready to check my animation with the quake effect and everything besides the effects from the node library, which was visible only on the render view. So in order to check everything, I have to render it. At the very end, I simply stretch it to fit entire screen with my two balls that are colliding, and this is how it looks like. Hope you like it, and hope you learn it and you can do it by yourself right now. Have a wonderful day. Cheers!